Good morning, YouTube. Warbles on a lot here. I find myself in a position to be making an update movie concerning the SunFoil Mk-5. That's the 30-watt gallium arsenide panel with a wooden frame surrounding it, mounted on my son's 2.5 litre turbocharged, intercooled, four-door, four-wheel drive diesel Rodeo, which can be seen on the far side of the new Powerline suspension tower. The fact that I'm driving my son's car and the fact that I've got a new tower in my front yard, they're linked. Linked by the fact that on Friday afternoon at 6 p.m, while attempting to drive through the main street of Glen Innes, the slave cylinder and the clutch of my Forester failed. Therefore, my son sent me home driving his Blue Beast. And on Saturday morning, in a bit of a hurry to get to town and use the Blue Beast and a snatch strap to tow the Forester out of the main street and deposit it at the mechanic's workshop, a certain particular preoccupied old hillbilly entirely forgot the fact that the Blue Beast was too tall to fit under the power line, which used to go from the machinery shed to the old power line suspension tower. The one which has been there for 15 years, not only holding up the power lines, but also mounting the 30-watt panel, which marked my early transition from hurricane lights to solar power. The same 30-watt panel, which currently sits in the centre of the top row of my tower of power, and it still feeds the pyramid which stores the electricity. And so this is what the SunFoil did to the old Powerline tripod. Completely destroyed it. I mean, it was only just holding together by dint of being braced to a bulldozer battery to balance the tension of the line coming off the machinery shed. So anyway, that's what a SunFoil does to a 15-year-old Powerline tripod. Now let's have a bit of a look at what the Powerline tripod did to the SunFoil. And before I show it to you, bear in mind I'd already organised with my son permission for me to remove this Mk-5, take the woodwork off and put the solar panel back up there as a converted Mk-8, okay? Because the paint failed. That let the rain get into the wood and the wood went rotten. So as far as I can see, using Pinus radiata as a wooden frame for a SunFoil turns out not to be a clever idea. At least, not unless you can get very much better paint than the stuff that I used. But essentially, this is the impact damage caused by cutting the power line and pulling it down. Whereas if you look carefully at the top of the frame over there on the far side, there's an entire piece of the substructure missing. All the paintwork is in terrible condition. Particularly this piece, which has allowed water to get in there and completely rot the thing out. Perhaps if I'd used chainsaw milled stringy bark, it wouldn't have mattered if the paint had failed, because this stuff tends to stick around for about 70 years before it goes rotten, unmaintained. Whereas this is radiata pine on the roof of a car for 3 years. Now the reason the Mk-5 had a wooden frame was because the wooden frame was cheaper and faster and simpler to construct than the sheet aluminium frame for the Mk-3. But whereas the Mk-3 was able to achieve aerodynamic improvements, the Mk-5 just blended in with the paintwork and the lines of the vehicle. It didn't save any fuel. The Mk-3 saved 14 litres per year from sheer aerodynamics. But even so, 14 litres per year of aerodynamics does not justify $600 worth of sheet metal work to streamline a $150 solar panel. So the current thinking is that there is no point or reason in building a Mk-5 wooden framed SunFoil, because it's easier to just use 4 pieces of 50mm 90-degree aluminium angle and put it straight onto the top of the vehicle. To ventilate it and streamline it somewhat, I will be drilling holes 1/4 of an inch on 1/2 inch centres all along the trailing edge, but I think the Mk-8 is going to be the definitive SunFoil in that it's the simplest, cheapest, fastest way of putting a solar panel on the roof of a vehicle. And the aerodynamics don't really matter much, because most road vehicles are no more streamlined than the back end of a brick. And even the ones that do have an aerodynamically reasonable trailing edge are incredibly aerodynamically filthy on the underside. So there you go. When convincing people to put a fuel efficiency improvement onto their vehicle, installation cost is really, really paramount in their thinking. And in the intervening years since I first had this sort of a brainwave, people have become much more used to seeing solar panels on the road. You see them on caravans, you see them on Winnebagos, you're starting to see them on 4-wheel drives. So people are no longer so horrified at the idea of having a bare solar panel on the roof of a vehicle, because they've cottoned on to the idea that it's a lot cheaper to feed sunlight to a car battery than it is to feed fossil fuel to a car battery. Okay, so this is the big reveal. I have removed the SunFoil Mk-5. Here it is, sitting on the ground in all its dilapidated glory. And the funny thing is that I was developing concerns that aerodynamic forces might be pretty soon getting to a point where they could have ripped this thing off the roof, because I was afraid that the mountings may have come off. Well, one side was fine. But not so much the other side. There you go. This is why radiator pine is not actually particularly good on the roof of a car. Now let's have a look at the underside. I think that qualifies as yucky poo. And the leading edge was not far off going, although it's hard. Now the leading edge was what cut the power cord in half. Basically, the structure was sufficiently torsionally rigid that this side was strong enough to keep the whole thing sitting on the roof, when the other side had been purely decorative and ornamental for months. So, the SunFoil 5th prototype, taken out of service for having gone rotten. But that was just the woodwork. The electrics, well, the panel's fine. As you can see, 19 amps. Below that, naughty, 19.2 volts. 0.3 of an amp. See, it is actually a true reading. Almost 0.4 of an amp. However, at that current flow, you've got virtually no voltage potential. Haven't really got enough. Well, actually, that's me just spinning it. We have the motor going. We came up to 1.2 amps before the sun went behind the cloud. The voltage comes back down through 12, the motor slows down and stops. So, yeah, the woodwork's not much good, but the solar panel is still fine. And I'd like to point out that this is a gallium arsenide panel. They have a larger area for a given rated output in watts, but they are particularly good at making power on cloudy days as compared to your silicon panels. 30-watt panel in the centre is a silicon panel. The two top left and right panels are 30-watt gallium arsenide panels. They're bigger, they're a bit cheaper, and they're better on a cloudy day. And I can say that with a fair amount of certainty because I've recently been able to compare a fixed array with my tracking array, and the fixed array uses silicon panels, 10 times the amount of generating capacity as mine. On a sunny day, yeah, their array makes probably 8 times more power than mine. On a cloudy day, it only makes 3 times more power than mine on a panel-for-panel basis. Their panels are all silicon. They don't have any gallium arsenide panels. So, not all solar panels are the same. So, there you go. For those of you who are wondering what's been happening on the SunFoil front, now you know. Warbles on a lot to YouTube. Ciao.